Hey friends, I'm Emily from the Bow and Branch Library. Welcome to our middle grade book club. For this selection, we have chosen The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. We are presenting our readings with permission from Scholastic, the publisher, and we hope you enjoy Scorpio Races with Maggie Stiefvater. Make sure that you check the description box at the end of this video for your discussion questions for this week. Today we're going to be doing the prologue, Chapter 1, Chapter 2. Something pretty cool. This is a signed copy. Prologue. 9 years earlier. Sean. It is the first day of November, and so, today, someone will die. Even under the brightest sun, the frigid autumn sea is all the colors of the night, dark blue and black and brown. I watch the ever-changing patterns in the sea as it's pummeled by countless hooves. They run the horses on the beach, a pale road between the black water and the chalk cliffs. It is never safe, but it's never so dangerous as today, race day. This time of year I live and breathe the beach. My cheeks feel raw with the wind throwing sand against them. My thighs sting from the friction of the saddle. My arms ache from holding up 2,000 pounds of horse. I have forgotten what it is like to be warm, and what a full night's sleep feels like, and what my name sounds like spoken instead of shouted across yards of sand. I am so alive. As I head down to the cliffs with my father, one of the race officials stops me. He says, "Sean Kendrick, you are 10 years old. You haven't discovered it yet, but there are more interesting ways to die than on this beach." My father doubles back and takes the official's arm as if the man were a restless horse. They share a brief exchange about age restrictions during the race. My father wins. "If your son is killed," the official says, "the only fault is yours." My father doesn't even answer him, just leads his uisce stallion away. On the way down to the water, we're jostled and pushed by men and by horses. I slide beneath one horse as it rears up, its rider jerked at the end of the lead. Unharmed, I find myself facing the sea, surrounded on all sides by capaill, the water horses. They are every color of the pebbles on the beach: black, red, golden, white, ivory, gray, blue. Men hang the bridles with red tassels and daisies to lessen the danger of the dark November sea, but I wouldn't trust a handful of petals to save my life. Last year, a water horse trailing flowers and bells tore a man's arm half off from his body. These are not ordinary horses. Drape them with charms, hide them from the sea, but today, on the beach, do not turn your back. Some of the horses have lathered. Froth drips down their lips and chests, looking like sea foam, hiding the teeth that will tear into men later. They are beautiful and deadly, loving us and hating us. My father sends me off to get his saddlecloth and armband from another set of officials. The color of the cloth is meant to allow the spectators far up on the cliffs to identify my father, but is in his case. They won't need it, not with his stallion's brilliant red coat. "Ah, Kendrick," the officials say, which is both my father's name and mine. "It'll be a red cloth for him." As I return to my father, I am hailed by a rider. "Ho, Sean Kendrick!" He's diminutive and wiry, his face carved out of rock. Fine day for it. I am honored to be greeted like an adult, like I belong here. We nod to each other before he turns back to his horse to finish saddling up. His small racing saddle is hand-tooled, and as he lifts the flap to give the girth a final tug, I see words burned into the leather. "Our dead drink the sea." My heart is jerking in my chest as I hand the cloth to my father. He seems unsettled as well, and I wish I was riding, not him. Myself, I am sure of. The red uisce stallion is restless and snorting, ears pricked, eager. He is very hot today. He will be fast and difficult to hold. My father gives me the reins so that he can saddle the water horse with the red cloth. I lick my teeth. They taste like salt, and watch my father tie the matching armband around his upper arm. Every year I have watched him, and every year he has tied it with a steady hand, but not this year. His fingers are clumsy, and I know he is afraid of the red stallion. I have ridden him this cobble. On his back, the wind beating me, the ground jarring me, the sea spraying our legs, we never tire. I lean close to the stallion's ear and trace a counterclockwise circle above his eye as I whisper into his soft ear. "Sean!" my father snaps, and the cobble's head jerks up quickly enough that his skull nearly strikes mine. "What are you doing with your face next to his today? Does he not look hungry to you? Do you think you'd look fine with half a face?" But I just look at the stallion's square pupil, and he looks back, his head turned slightly away from me. I hope he's remembering what I told him. Do not eat my father. My father makes a noise in his throat and says, I think you should go up now. Come here, and he slaps my shoulder before mounting up. He is small and dark on the back of the red stallion. Already his hands work ceaselessly on the reins to keep the horse in place. The motion twists the bit in the horse's mouth. I watch his head rocking to and fro. It's not how I would have done it, but I'm not up there. I want to tell my father to mind how the stallion spooks to the right, how I think he sees better out of his left eye, but instead I say, See you when it's over. We nod to each other like strangers, the goodbye unpracticed and uncomfortable. I'm watching the race from the cliffs when a grey uisce horse seizes my father by his arm and then his chest. For one moment the waves do not attack the shore, and the gulls above us do not flap, and the gritty air in my lungs doesn't escape. Then the grey water horse tears my father from his uneasy place on the back of the red stallion. The grey cannot keep its ragged grip on my father's chest, and so my father falls to the sand, already ruined before the hooves get to him. He was in second place, so it takes a long minute before the rest of the horses have passed over the top of his body and I can see it again. By then he is a long black and scarlet smear, half submerged in the frothy tide. The red stallion circles, halfway to a hungry creature of the sea, but he does as I asked. He does not eat the thing that was my father. Instead, the stallion climbs back into the water. Nothing is as red as the sea that day. I don't think often on my father's body strung out through the reddening surf. Instead, I remember him as he was before the race. Afraid. I won't make the same mistake. Chapter 1. Puck. People say my brothers would be lost without me, but really I'd be lost without them. Usually if you ask someone on the island where they come from, they say something like round about Skarmouth, or backside of Thisbe, the hard side, or stone's throw from Thalla. But not me. I remember being small, clutching my father's lined hand, and some wind-beaten old farmer who looked like he'd been dug out of the sod, asking, Where are you from, girl? I answered in a voice too loud for my tiny freckled self, The Connolly house. He said, What's that now? And I replied back, Where we Connollys live, because I'm one. And then, I am still a bit embarrassed about this part of it, as it speaks to the black part of my character. I added, And you're not? That's just the way things are. There are the Connollys, and then there's the rest of the world, though the rest of the world, when you live on Thisbe, is not very large. Before last fall, it was always this, me, my younger brother Finn, my older brother Gabe, and our parents. We were a pretty quiet family together. Finn was always putting things together and taking them back apart and saving any spare parts in a box under his bed. Gabe wasn't a huge conversationalist either. 6 years older than me, he saved his energy for growing. He was 6 feet tall by the age of 13. Our dad played the tin whistle when he was home, and our mother performed the miracle of the loaves and fishes every evening, though I didn't realize what a miracle it was until she wasn't around. It wasn't that we were unfriendly with the rest of the island. We were just friendlier with ourselves. Being a Connolly came first. That was the only rule. You could hurt all the feelings you liked, so long as you weren't hurting the feelings of a Connolly. It's midway through October now. Like all autumn days on the island, it begins cold, but warms and gains color as the sun rises. I get a curry comb and a brush, and I knock the dust out of Dove's dun hide until my fingers warm up. By the time I saddle her up, she's clean and I'm grubby. She is my mare and my best friend, and I keep waiting for something bad to happen to her because I love her so much. As I pull up her girth, Dove pushes her nose into my side, just shy of a nip, and pulls her head back quickly. She loves me too. I can't ride long. Soon I'll have to come back and help Finn make cookies for the local shops. I also paint teapots for the tourists, and since the races are coming up, I have more than enough orders backed up. After the races, there will be no more visitors from the mainland until spring. The ocean is just too uncertain a thing when it's cold. Gabe will be out all day working at the Skarmouth Hotel, getting the rooms ready for the race spectators. When you're an orphan on Thisbe, it's hard work making ends meet. I didn't actually realize there wasn't much to the island until a few years ago when I started reading magazines. It doesn't feel it to me, but Thisbe's tiny. 4,000 people on a rocky crag jutting from the sea, hours from the mainland. It's all cliffs and horses and sheep and one-track roads winding past treeless fields to Skarmouth, the largest town on the island. The truth is, until you know any different, the island is enough. Actually, I know different, and it's still enough. So I'm up and riding, my toes cold in my scruffy paddock boots, and Finn is sitting in the Morris in the drive, carefully applying black tape to a rip in the passenger seat. The rip was a gift from Puffin, the barn cat. At least Finn has now learned to never leave the windows rolled down. He's pretending to look annoyed with the repairs, but I can tell that he is actually cheerful to be doing it. It is against Finn's code to reveal too much happiness. When he sees me riding Dove, Finn gives me a funny look. Once upon a time, before last year, that funny look would have changed into a sly smile, and then he would have gunned the engine and we would have raced, me on Dove, him in the car, though he was technically too young to drive. A lot too young. Didn't matter, though. Who was going to stop us? So we would race, me through fields, him on the roads, first to the beach, had to make the others bed for a week. But we haven't raced for nearly a year. Not since my parents died on the boat. I turn Dove away, making little circles in the side yard. She's eager and too brisk to concentrate this morning, and I'm too cold to make her soft and round on the bit. She wants to gallop. I hear the Morris's engine rev. I turn in time to see the car go tearing down the lane, accompanied by a puff of ill-advised exhaust. I hear Finn's whoop a moment later. He pokes his head out the window, face pale under his dusty hair, smiling a grin that shows every tooth he has. "Are you waiting for an invitation?" he calls. Then he retreats back into the cab, and the engine revs high as he shifts gears. "Oh, you're on," I tell him, though he's far, far out of earshot. Dove's ears swivel back toward me and then prick toward the road, quivering. It is a wild, cool morning, and she barely needs to be asked. I press my calves into her sides and cluck my tongue. Dove leaps into action, hooves digging up half circles of dirt behind her, and we tear after Finn. Finn's path is no mystery. He has to follow the roads, and there's only the main one, heading into Scarmouth past our house. It's not the straightest way, though. It winds around patchwork fields protected by stone walls and hedges. There's no sense following his serpentine progress, marked by a trail of dust. Instead, Dove and I tear across the fields. Dove is not large. None of the natural island horses are, as the grass isn't great. But she's scopy and brave, so she and I throw ourselves over hedgerows at will, so long as the footing is good. We shave off the first corner, spooking several sheep. "Sorry," I say to them over my shoulder. The next hedgerow comes up while I'm minding the sheep, and Dove has to twist herself in a hurry to launch herself over. I throw out reins in the world's worst release, but at least keep from jerking on her mouth, and she tucks her legs up tight beneath her and saves us both. As she canters away from the hedge, I gather up the reins again and pat her shoulder to show that I noticed her rescuing us, and she tips her ear back to show she appreciates that I cared. Then it's sailing across a field that used to hold sheep, but now holds scrubby heather waiting to be burned off. The Morris is still a little ahead of us, a dark shape in the front of a tower of dust. I'm not worried about his lead. To get a car down to the beach, he'll have to either take the road through town with its sharp right angles and crossing pedestrians, or make a detour around the town, losing several minutes and giving us a good chance to catch up. I hear the Morris hesitate at the roundabout, then zoom toward town. I can take the road around Scarmouth and avoid any more jumping, or I can skirt through the very edge of the town, popping through a few back gardens and risking being seen by Gabe at the hotel. I can already imagine being the first to charge onto the beach. I decide to risk Gabe seeing me. It's been long enough since we did this that the stodgy old ladies can't complain too much about a horse passing through their yards, as long as I don't squash anything useful. "Come on, Dove," I whisper. She charges across the road and through a break in the hedgerow. Here there are houses looking like they grew out of the rock, and cluttered back gardens full of possessions that have spilled out of the houses, and on the other side of them, a stretch of solid stone that no horse should have to canter on. The only way across is to tear through a half-dozen yards and past the hotel on the other side. I hope that everyone's busily at work at the piers or in their kitchens. We burst through the gardens, half leaping over wheelbarrows in the first, avoiding a crop of herbs in the second, and getting barked at by an evil terrier in the third. Then, inexplicably, over an old empty bathtub in the final yard, and we're off down the road to the hotel. Of course, there is Gabe, and he sees me instantly. He's sweeping the walk in front of the hotel with a mighty push-broom. The hotel is a forbidding, ivy-covered building behind him, the leaves cut in neat squares to let the sun into the windows with their bright blue sills. The height of the hotel blocks the morning light and casts a deeper blue shadow on the stone walk he sweeps. Gabe looks tall and grown up with his brown jacket stretched across his broad shoulders. His ginger-blonde hair creeps down the back of his neck, a little long, but he's still handsome. I feel a sudden surge of fierce pride that he is my brother. He stops what he's doing to lean on the end of the broom and watch me canter by on Dove. "Don't be mad," I shout at him. A smile walks over one side of his face, but not the other. It almost looks like he's actually happy, if you've never seen one of his real ones. The sad thing is this. I've got used to this fake one. I've become willing to wait for the real one to reappear, without realizing I should have been working hard to find it again. I canter on, urging Dove into a gallop once we're off the walk and back into the grass. Here the ground is soft and sandy and begins to slope rapidly, the track becoming narrow between the hills and dunes that lead to the beach. I can't tell if Finn is ahead of me or behind me. I have to draw Dove back down to a trot as the ground grows too steep. Finally, she makes an awkward leap that takes us down to sea level. When we round the final bank, I make a noise of irritation. The Morris is already parked where the grass meets the sand. The scent of exhaust hangs in the air, cupped by the rise of the ground around us. "You're still a good girl," I whisper to Dove. She is out of breath, but she blows out her lips. She considers it a good race. Finn stands half in and half out of the car, the driver's side door standing open, his feet on the running board. One arm rests on the roof and the other on the upper part of the open door. He is looking out towards the sea. But when Dove blows out her breath through her lips again, he looks back to me, shielding his eyes. I can see that his face is worried, so I nudge Dove next to the car. I let out the reins so that she can graze while we stand there, but she doesn't lower her head. Instead, she, too, turns her gaze towards the ocean, 100 yards ahead of us. "What?" I ask. I have a sick feeling in my stomach. I follow the line of his eyes. I can just see a gray head thrusting its way above the surf, so far away and so close to the color of the tossed ocean that I can almost believe I'm imagining it. But Finn's eyes wouldn't be so large unless he was certain. Sure enough, the head emerges again, and this time I see dark nostrils blow so wide that I glimpse a tinge of red in them, even from here. The rest of the head follows, and the neck, crimped mane pasted to its skin by salt water, and then the powerful shoulders glistening and damp. The water horse surges from the ocean and gives a mighty leap, as if the final steps over the incoming tide are a huge obstacle to overcome. Finn flinches as the horse gallops down the beach toward us, and I lay a hand on his elbow, though my own heart is thumping in my ears. "Don't move," I whisper. "Don't move, don't move, don't move." I cling to what we've been told over and over, that the water horses love a moving target. They love the chase. I make a list of reasons it won't attack us. We're motionless. We're not near the water. We're next to the Morris, and the water horses despise iron. Sure enough, the water horse gallops past us without pause. I can see Finn swallowing, his Adam's apple bobbing in his skinny neck, and it's so true. It's so hard not to flinch until it's leapt back into the ocean once more. They're here again. This is what happens every fall. My parents didn't follow the races, but I know the shape of the story nonetheless. The closer it gets to November, the more horses the sea spits out. Those islanders who mean to race in future Scorpio races will often go out in great hunting parties to capture the fresh capaill, which is always dangerous, since the horses are hungry and still sea-mad. And once the new horses emerge, it's a signal to those who are racing in the current year's races to begin training the horses they caught the years before. Horses that have been comparatively docile until the smell of the fall sea begins and to call the magic inside of them. During the month of October until the 1st of November, the island becomes a map of safe areas and unsafe areas, because unless you're one of the riders, you don't want to be around when a capaill goes crazy. Our parents tried hard to shield us from the realities of the uisce horses, but it was impossible to avoid it. Friends would miss school because an uisce horse had killed their dog overnight. Dad would have to drive around a ruined carcass on the way to Skarmouth, evidence of where a water horse and a land horse had gotten into a fight. The bells at St. Columba's would ring midday for the funeral of a fisherman caught unawares on the shore. Finn and I don't need to be told how dangerous the horses are. We know it every day. "Come on," I say to him. Staring out to sea, his thin arms bracing him upright, he looks very young just then, my little brother, though he's really caught in that strange no-man's land between child and man. I feel the sudden urge to protect him from the grief that October is going to bring, but it isn't really the grief of this October I have to worry about. It's that of an October already long gone. Finn doesn't answer, just ducks back down into the Morris and shuts the door without looking at me. It's already a bad day, and that's before Gabe gets home. Chapter 2. Sean. Beach Grattan, the butcher's son, has just slaughtered a cow and is draining the blood into a bucket for me when I hear the news. We are standing in the yard behind the butcher's, the sound of our lack of conversation amplified by the echo of our footsteps on the stone around us. The day is beautiful and cool, and I'm restless, shifting from foot to foot. The stones beneath me are uneven, pushed up by roots from trees no longer in evidence, and stained, too, brown and black, in dots and splatters and rivulets. "Beach, did you hear yet? The horses are out." Thomas Grattan addresses his son, emerging from the open door of his shop. He had started into the courtyard, but pauses mid-stride when he sees me. "Sean Kendrick, I didn't realize you were here." I don't say anything, and Beach grunts. "Came by when he heard I was slaughtering." He gestures to the cow's corpse, which now hangs, decapitated and legless, from a tripod of wood. The ground's awash with blood from where Beach was slow to place the bucket beneath the cow. The cow's head lies off to the edge of the yard, tumbled onto its side. Thomas Grattan's mouth works, as if he'd like to say something to Beach about the scene, but he doesn't. Thisbe is an island well populated by sons disappointing their fathers. "Did you hear then, Kendrick?" Thomas Grattan asks. "Is that why you're here and not on a horse?" "I am here because the new man that Malvern has hired to feed the horses are afraid at best and incompetent at worst, and the hay has been poor and the cuts of meat even worse. There's been no blood to speak of for the capaill, as if by treating them as regular horses the grooms hope to make them so. So I am here because I have to do things myself if I want them done properly. But I just say, I hadn't heard." Beach slaps the dead cow affably on the neck and tips the bucket this way and that. He doesn't look at his father. "Who did you hear from?" I don't really care about the answer to his question. It doesn't matter who heard or who saw what, only that the capaill are climbing out of the sea. I can feel in my bones that it's true. So this is why I feel restless. This is why Cor paces before his stall door and why I can't sleep. "The Connolly kids saw one," Thomas Grattan said. Beach makes a noise and slaps the cow again, more for emphasis than for any practical purpose. The Connolly's story is one of the more pitiful ones Thisbe has on offer. 3 children of a fisherman, orphaned twice over by the capaill. There are plenty of single mothers to be had on the island, their men gone missing in the night, stolen away by either a savage water horse or by the temptation of the mainland. Plenty of single fathers, too, wives snatched from the shore by suddenly present teeth or seized by tourists with large wallets. But to lose both parents in one blow, that's unusual. My story, father cold in the ground, mother lost to the mainland, is common enough to have been forgotten long ago, which is fine by me. There are better things to be known for. Thomas Grattan watches soundlessly as Beach hands off the bucket to me and begins to indelicately butcher the corpse. It doesn't seem like there should be an artful way to butcher a cow, but there is, and this is not it. For several long moments I watch Beach carve jagged lines, grunting to himself all the while. I think he may be trying to hum. I am mesmerized by the utter unawareness of the entire process, the childlike pleasure Beach takes in a job ill done. Thomas Grattan and I catch each other's eye. "He's learned his butchering from his mother, not me," Thomas Grattan tells me. I don't quite smile, but he seems gratified by my response anyway. "If you don't like how I do it," Beach says, not looking up from his work, "I'd rather be at the pub, and this knife fits in your hand too." Thomas Grattan makes a mighty sound that comes from somewhere between his nostrils and the top of his mouth. It is a sound that, to me, effectively proves the etymology of Beach's grunts. He turns away from Beach and looks at the red-tiled roof of one of the buildings flanking the courtyard. "So, I expect you'll be riding in the race this year," he says. Beach doesn't respond, because of course his father is speaking to me. I reply, "I expect so." Thomas Grattan doesn't answer right away, just continues gazing at the evening sun lighting the roof tiles to brilliant orange red. Eventually he says, "Yes, I expect that's what Malvern asks of you then." I have worked in the Malvern yard since I was 10, and some people say that I got the job out of pity, but those people are wrong. The Malverns' livelihood and their name are under the roof of their stable. They export sport horses to the mainland, but they won't have anything compromising that, far less something as humanitarian as pity. I've been with the Malverns long enough to know that the Grattans do not care for them, and I know that Thomas Grattan wants me to say something that will allow him to better despise Benjamin Malvern. So I allow a long pause to diffuse the weight of his question, and then I say, with a rattle of the bucket handle, "If it's all right, I'll settle the account later this week." Thomas Grattan laughs softly. "You are the oldest 19 I've ever met, Sean Kendrick." I don't reply, because he's probably right. He tells me to settle the account this Friday, as usual, and Beach gives me a parting grunt as I leave the courtyard with the blood. I need to be thinking about bringing the ponies in from the pasture and adjusting the thoroughbred's feed and how I will keep my little flat above the stable warm tonight, but I am thinking of the news Thomas Grattan brought. I am here on firm ground, but part of me is already down on the beach, and my own blood is singing, "I'm so, so alive." Chapter 3. Puck. That night, Gabe breaks the only rule we have. I am unambitious with dinner because we don't have anything other than dried beans, and I'm sick of beans. I make an apple cake and feel rather virtuous about it. Finn is annoying me by spending the afternoon in the yard tinkering with an ancient broken chainsaw that he claims someone gave him, but that he probably pulled out of someone's rubbish because it had gears. I'm cross because I'm inside by myself, which makes me feel like I ought to be tidying, and I don't want to tidy. I slam around a lot of drawers and cupboards while sort of messing over the eternally full sink, but Finn doesn't hear me, or pretends not to. Finally, before the sun completely vanishes over the high ground in the west, I throw open the side door and stand there looking at Finn meaningfully, waiting for him to look up and say something to me. He is all buckled over the top of the chainsaw, which lies dismembered in front of him, pieces spread tidily over the packed dirt of the yard. He wears one of Gabe's sweaters that, while several years old, is still too large for him. He has the sleeves doubled back into fat, perfectly even cuffs, and his dark hair is mussed into an oily rooster tail. He looks like an orphan, and that makes me cross too. Are you going to come in and eat the cake while it still remembers being warm? I sound a little bratty, but I don't care. Finn says, without looking up, in a minute. He doesn't mean a minute, and I know it. I'm going to eat it all myself, I say. He doesn't reply. He's lost in the mystery of the chainsaw. I think, just for that moment, that I hate brothers, because they never realize when something is important to you, and they only care about their own things. I'm about to say something that I might be embarrassed about later when I see Gabe walking his bicycle through the dusk towards us. Neither of us says hi to him as he opens the yard gate, pushes his bicycle through, and closes it again. Finn because he is self-involved, and me because I am annoyed at Finn. Gabe puts his bicycle away in the little lean-to by the back of the house, and then comes to stand behind Finn. Gabe takes off his skullcap and holds it in his armpit, his arms crossed, wordlessly watching what Finn's doing. I'm not sure Gabe can actually tell what it is that Finn has eviscerated in the barely there blue light of evening, but Finn rocks the body of the chainsaw slightly to give Gabe a better view. This apparently tells Gabe everything he needs to know, because as Finn looks up, tilting his chin toward our older brother, Gabe just gives a little nod. Their unspoken language both entrances and infuriates me. There's apple cake, I say. It's still warm. Gabe removes his skullcap from his armpit and turns to me. What's dinner? Apple cake, Finn comments from the ground. And chainsaw, I replied. Finn made a lovely chainsaw to go with. Apple cake's fine, Gabe says, but he sounds tired. Puck, don't leave the door open. It's cold out here. I step back so that he can walk into the house, and as he does, I notice that he stinks of fish. I hate it when the Berringers have him cleaning fish. He makes the whole house smell. Gabe pauses in the door. I stare at him then, at the way he stands, at his hands on the doorframe, his face turned towards his hand as if he is studying his fingers or the chipped red paint beneath them. The way his face looks seems far away, like a stranger's, and I suddenly want to hug him like I used to when I was small. Finn, he says, his voice low. When you get that together, I need to talk to you and Kate. Finn looks up, his face startled, but Gabe is already gone, disappearing past me into the room he still shares with Finn, despite our parents' room being empty. Either Gabe's request or his use of my real name has gotten Finn's attention in a way that my apple cake couldn't, and he begins to assemble the parts rapidly, dumping them into a battered cardboard box. I feel unsettled while I wait for Gabe to emerge from his room. The kitchen has turned into the small yellow place that it becomes at night when the darkness outside presses it smaller. I hurriedly wash off 3 plates that match and cut a fat piece of apple cake for each of us, the biggest one for Gabe. Setting them out on the table, 3 lonely plates where once there would have been 5, depresses me, so I busy myself making some mint tea to go with them. As I arrange and rearrange the teacups by our plates, it occurs to me, too late, that mint tea and apple cake might not go together. By then, Finn has begun the process of washing his hands, which can take centuries. Patiently and silently he lathers his hands with the bar of milk soap, working between each finger and rubbing each line in his palm. He keeps doing it when Gabe emerges in fresh clothing, but still smelling of fish. This is nice, Gabe tells me as he pulls out his chair, and I'm relieved, because nothing is wrong. Everything will be fine. Mint smells good after today. I try to think of what Mum or Dad would have said to him then. For some reason, our age difference feels like a massive void just now. I thought they had you getting the hotel ready today. They were short-handed at the pier, Gabe says, and Barringer knows I'm quicker than Joseph. Joseph is Barringer's son, too lazy to be quick at anything. Gabe told me once that we should be grateful for Joseph's inability to think of anything but himself, because it is why Gabe has a job. I'm not grateful at the moment, though, because Gabe smells like fish since Joseph is a feck. Gabe holds his tea but doesn't drink it. Finn is still washing. I sit down at my place. Gabe waits a few more beats and then says, "Finn, enough, okay?" Finn still takes another minute to rinse, but then he shuts off the tap and comes and sits across from me. "Do we still say grace if it's only apple cake?" "And a chainsaw," I say. "God, thank you for this cake and Finn's chainsaw," Gabe says. "Are you happy?" "God or me?" I ask. "God's always happy," Finn says. "You're the one who needs pleasing." This strikes me as incredibly untrue, but I refuse to rise to the bait. I look at Gabe, who's looking at his plate. I ask him, "So, what?" Outside, I hear Dove whickering where the pasture meets the yard. She wants her handful of grain. Finn looks at Gabe, who's still looking at his plate, pressing his fingers into the top of the apple cake as if he's checking the texture. I am suddenly aware of how tomorrow, the anniversary of our parents' deaths, has been looming inside me, and how it never occurred to me to think that it might be the same for quiet, solid Gabe. He doesn't lift his eyes. He simply says, "I'm leaving the island." Finn keeps his gaze on Gabe. "What?" I can't speak. It's like he said it in a different language, and my brain has to translate it before I can understand it. "I'm leaving the island," Gabe tells us. And this time the statement is firmer, more real, though he still doesn't look at either of us. Finn manages a whole sentence first. "What will we do with all of our things?" I add, "What about Dove?" Gabe says, "I'm leaving the island." Finn looks like Gabe has slapped him. I jut my chin out and try to get Gabe to meet my eyes. "You're going to go without us?" Then my mind provides an answer, a logical one that gives him an excuse, and I give it to him. "So you aren't going long? You're just going for—" I shake my head. I can't think of what he would be going for. Gabe finally lifts his face. "I'm moving away." Across from me, Finn is clinging to the edge of the table, his fingertips pressed into the wood so that they're white on the very ends but bright red towards the joints. I don't think he's aware of it. "When?" I say. 2 weeks. Puffin is mewling around his feet, rubbing her chin against his leg and chair, but Gabe doesn't look down or acknowledge her. "I promised Barringer I'd stay that long." "Barringer!" I say. "You promised Barringer you'd stay that long. What about us? What's going to happen to us?" He won't look at me. I'm trying to imagine how we can survive with one less earning Connolly and one more empty bed. "You can't go," I say. "You can't go so soon." My pulse is clubbing inside my chest, and I have to press my jaw shut to keep my teeth from chattering. Gabe's face is utterly unchanged, and I know that I'm going to regret what I say, but it's the only thing I can think of, so I say it. "I'm riding in the races," I tell him, just like that. Now I have both my brothers' full attention, and my cheeks feel like I've been leaning over a hot stove. "Oh, come on, Kate," Gabe says, but his voice is not as sure as it should be. He half believes me, despite himself. Before I say anything else, I have to think about it and decide if I believe me. I think of this morning, my hair tugged in the wind, the feel of Dove stretching out into a gallop. I think of the day after the races, the red-stained sand high up on the beach. I think of the last boats leaving for the winter, and Gabe on one of them. I would do it, if it came to it. "I am. Didn't you hear in town? The horses are coming out. Training starts tomorrow." I am so proud that my words sound firm. Gabe's mouth works as if he is saying all sorts of things without parting his lips, and I know that he is going through all the counter-arguments in his head. Part of me wants him to say, "You can't," so I can ask, "Why?" And he would have to realize that he can't answer because you might leave Finn all by himself, and he can't ask why because then he'd have to answer that question as well. I should be feeling very clever and pleased with myself because it's very hard to render Gabe speechless, but mostly my heart is just going tip, tip, tip in my chest. Very shallow and fast, and I'm half hoping that he'll say that if I don't ride, he'll stay. But finally he says, "All right, I'll stay until after the races." He looks cross. "But no longer than that, or the boats will stop running till spring. This is a really stupid thing you're doing, Kate." He's mad at me, but I don't care about that. All I care is that he's staying for a little while longer. "Well, sounds like we'll need the money if I win," I say, trying to sound as adult and blasé as possible, but thinking that maybe if I do win the money, he won't have to leave. And then I get up from the table and put my plate and teacup in the sink like it was a normal evening. Then I walk into my room, close the door, and put my pillow over my head so no one will hear. "Selfish bastard," I whisper, the words close under the pillowcase. Then I burst into tears. Thank you for joining us for the prologue through chapter 3. Next time we will be reading chapter 4 through 7. And make sure that you check that description box at the bottom for our discussion questions for the week. Thank you so much.